He was the CEO of a billion-dollar tech empire, pacing in his office late into the night. Everyone had tried. His top engineers, his advisors, even a team of international consultants. No one could crack the $200 million problem, threatening to collapse his company. But then, while picking up a coffee cup in his office, he overheard something that stopped him cold. His maid, the quiet woman everyone overlooked, muttering to herself as she glanced at the whiteboard. "That's simple," she said, and in seconds she solved it. What he did next didn't just change her life. It shook the entire company from top to bottom. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. Whether you're here for the first time or you've been following our stories for a while, I'm truly grateful to have you here. If you love emotional, powerful, and surprising real lifestyle stories, you're in the right place. Please hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who still believes that brilliance can come from the most unexpected places. Now, let's uncover how one brilliant maid cracked a $200 million mystery while dusting a CEO's office. Nathaniel Harper, Nate only to the few who dared use it, stood at the edge of his private study, cradling a coffee he hadn't touched. He stared out over the city, but his mind was elsewhere. The lights didn't impress him anymore. The skyline no longer symbolized triumph. Lately, it just looked like a scoreboard, and he wasn't winning. The Center Logic project, his company's golden goose, was falling apart. A $200 million rollout, years in development, brought to its knees by a failure no one could trace. Deadlines had been shattered. Clients were restless. Engineers had pulled all-nighters. Consultants had flown in and flown out, taking his money and leaving behind more questions. And still the glitch remained, taunting him, laughing in the background of every board call. He rubbed his temples, jaw clenched. He was the man everyone relied on, the leader, the visionary, the fixer. But for weeks, he had no answers. Behind him, the quiet chime of the smart home's internal system echoed. Light cleaning schedule. 11 p.m. The night staff had arrived. Probably just Rose's niece. What was her name again? Isabel. Quiet girl. She moved like a whisper, said less than she did, and left the place spotless. She'd been with them for less than a month, but even his picky house manager hadn't found a single thing to complain about. He had barely spoken to her. He didn't have time to notice things like that anymore. Nate set the coffee down and returned to his desk, where the code logs glared at him from two monitors. Rows of numbers and scripts blinked back, clean but broken, like a puzzle with all the right pieces in the wrong places. He sat heavily in the chair and let the silence wrap around him like a weighted blanket. Then he heard it click, 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 typing. He froze. The sound was soft but steady, controlled, fast, focused. He turned slightly in his chair, listening. It wasn't coming from his keyboard. His workstation was locked. He stood slowly and followed the sound down the hall toward the auxiliary terminal he used for private testing, a smaller, outdated unit tucked in the corner of the lounge that no one ever used. As he turned the corner, the typing stopped. Isabel was sitting there, back straight, eyes wide, fingers frozen above the keys, like she'd been caught trespassing in a sacred space. Nate's mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. His expression was unreadable, but the silence screamed. I'm sorry," Isabel said quickly, standing up. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were panicked. "I saw a process running. It looked wrong. I wasn't trying to. What are you doing?" Nate's voice was low, controlled, not angry, just sharp. "I didn't mean to touch anything important," she said, stepping back. "I was just cleaning near the terminal." The screen was unlocked. Something caught my eye and I recognized it. "Recognize what?" he asked, walking toward the screen. "The loop," she said quietly, "in the validation chain. It's recursive, but it's also calling an outdated protocol. So it's clogging itself when traffic spikes." Nate leaned over the terminal. Her words didn't fully register until he saw it. The log, the section his entire development team had been dissecting for weeks, and it was fixed, elegant, lean, efficient. He blinked, then scrolled back, checked the revision history. No autosave. It wasn't backed up yet. "You just saw this?" "I studied computer science," she said softly. At MIT. I didn't finish. Life got complicated. He turned toward her slowly. MIT? She nodded once. I dropped out after my father's stroke. We moved to Austin for his care. I needed a job. This was the first one I found. She said it like it wasn't remarkable, like it didn't matter, but it did. Nate looked back at the screen, and his engineers, his $1 million team, had missed this for weeks. And the maid, the quiet girl who brewed coffee and folded towels with precision, had solved it in minutes. You weren't trying to hack anything? He asked, still stunned. Her lips twitched with restrained hurt. No, sir, just trying to help. There was a long pause. You should have told me, he said at last. I didn't think it would matter. He looked at her again. Really looked. She stood in a plain uniform, hair tied back, not a hint of pride in her posture. She wasn't here to be noticed. She never had been, but he noticed now. Isabel, he said quietly, this function, what you just fixed, was bleeding our system dry. You may have just saved a $200 million operation. Her breath caught. What? You heard me, Nate said, and you did it in under 60 seconds. She shifted uncomfortable. I didn't mean to overstep. Don't apologize, he said firmer now, not for seeing something no one else could. The room went still. Outside the city moved. The wind whispered against the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a train rumbled softly across the tracks. Inside, something else shifted. Nate sat down slowly in the chair she'd left. He ran the simulation again, this time with her fix integrated. No crash, no lag, just clean, steady flow. He didn't speak for a long while. Isabel stood there quietly, hands clasped in front of her, waiting for permission to leave, waiting for judgment. Finally, Nate turned in his chair, studying her face. You ever miss it? He asked. She frowned. Miss what? Being things, creating problem solving. She hesitated, then nodded once. Every day. Nate nodded too, more to himself than to her. Then he looked up. I'm going to remember this, he said. She didn't know what he meant, and he didn't explain. But the next morning, a note appeared on his desk in unfamiliar handwriting. Cleaned the console memory logs, left the fix intact. Hope that's okay. It smelled faintly of cinnamon, and Nate Harper, for the first time in weeks, smiled. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought matter. To me, either way. The sun rose over Austin with a warmth that fell out of place. The city buzzed with its usual morning rhythm. Coffee shops humming, cyclists cutting through traffic, the scent of breakfast tacos trailing behind food trucks. But in the penthouse, perched above it all, the world felt quieter, heavier. Nate Harper stared at the folded note on his desk. The cinnamon scent still lingered faintly on the paper, and somehow it made everything feel more real, more human. He ran a hand across his jaw, still trying to make sense of it all. A maid had fixed a critical code function that had paralyzed his team for nearly a month. Not guessed, solved with precision MIT. He'd Googled her before finishing his coffee. Isabel Reyes, no LinkedIn, no public resume, but a transcript buried deep in a student record archive told the story. MIT Computer Science, top 10% of her cohort, enrolled at 18, withdrew 2 years later. No disciplinary flags, no academic warnings, just vanished. He clicked into the next page, local records. A patient file tied to her father, Miguel Reyes, stroke recovery, home care needed, time-stamped 3 weeks before she left MIT. Nate sat back in his chair. She hadn't flunked out. She'd given up everything to come home. A quiet knock interrupted his thoughts. He looked up. Isabel stood in the doorway, eyes focused on the floor. She held a clean laundry basket against her hip. She was already mid-shift like nothing had happened the night before. He hesitated, unsure what tone to use now. Casual, professional. Something else entirely. You're early, he said. She looked up. I had a few apartments to finish before yours. I like to start here before the team comes in. Less noise. He nodded slowly. Do you have a minute? She blinked. For what? I want to ask you something. She shifted, clearly uncertain. I can spare a minute. He gestured to the armchair across from his desk. She didn't sit immediately, just hovered, unsure. Finally, she lowered herself onto the edge of the cushion, sitting like she wasn't meant to stay long. Nate leaned forward, folding his hands. "You fixed something last night that's been bleeding our infrastructure for weeks." "I just saw what was wrong," she said quickly. "It wasn't, don't downplay it." He interrupted gently. "That function was breaking our verification loop. You caught it in seconds." She didn't respond. "Why didn't you say anything before?" he asked. She looked away. "I don't really belong here. Not like that. I clean. I don't contribute." "Who told you that?" She gave a small, dry smile. Life. Silence filled the space again. It wasn't tense, but it carried weight. Two people studying each other across invisible lines. Neither of them quite understood. He reached for his mug, took a sip, then set it down again. "Tell me about MIT." She shook her head lightly as if trying to sweat away old memories. "I started early. Scholarships, high scores, it was all moving fast. I thought I had time. And then my dad collapsed during a client meeting. Stroke, moderate to severe damage. My mom was already gone. I flew back that weekend and just stayed." Nate's voice softened. "You never went back." "I meant to, but hospital bills piled up. I took on temp work. Then housekeeping. 1 year turned into 5. She paused. I stopped thinking about what I could have been, started focusing on what I needed to be. Nate didn't say anything right away. There was something in her voice, steady, not bitter, not proud, just resolved. It made him feel strange, small even. He'd built a company from a garage code base and had every accolade to show for it. But there was something about the way she carried her sacrifices that made us look easy. "You don't miss it?" he asked. "Every day," she whispered. Their eyes met. The moment held. Then from the hallway, the robotic vacuum hummed to life. Isabel stood quickly. "I should finish upstairs before contractors arrive." She picked up the basket, eyes darting to the side. But before she could step out, Nate said, "Would you consider coming back tonight after your shift?" She frowned. "To clean, to talk, just talk. I'd like your help with something." She studied him carefully. "You wanted to work on your systems?" "I want your insight," he said. "I want to understand how you see things. Clearly, it's different from how we do." She hesitated. "I don't know. I haven't done anything professional in years. I might be out of practice. You solved something 10 engineers couldn't. That doesn't mean I can do it again. It means I believe you can." She swallowed, then nodded once. "I'll think about it." As she walked out, Nate watched her disappear down the hall, her shoulders square, her step silent. He didn't know what this was. Curiosity, respect, something else. All he knew was that he couldn't ignore it anymore. That evening, back at her Aunt Rosa's duplex, Isabel stared at her cracked phone screen. Rosa sliced vegetables in the kitchen, humming along to an old Selena song on the radio. "Something on your mind?" Rosa asked without looking up. Isabel hesitated. "Mr. Harper asked me to stay after hours." The knife stopped. Rosa turned slowly, eyes narrowing. "For what?" "Not that," Isabel said quickly. "He wants help with code." Rosa blinked. "Code. He knows about MIT, about the fixes." A long pause stretched between them. "You're not paid for that," Rosa said finally. "I know. Don't let him take your talent for free. You've done that for too many people already." Isabel's chest tightened. She thought of late nights in school debugging open source tools for classmates who never remembered her name, of job interviews where she was either overqualified or undercredentialed, of changing her tone, her story, her hope just to survive. "It's not about money," she said softly. It felt good, like I was me again. Rosa studied her niece for a long time, then nodded. "Then do it," she said. "But don't forget who you are now. And don't forget who he is." Back in the penthouse, Nate paced the office as the clock neared 10 p.m. He'd printed a diagnostic thread from an older system and left it open on the secondary console just in case. He didn't want to pressure her. He just wanted to see. A knock broke the silence. He turned. Isabel stepped in, holding her tablet, a faint look of uncertainty behind her eyes. "You sure?" she asked. He nodded. I am if you are. She walked in, the faintest scent of cinnamon trailing behind her, and as she took the chair across from him, something unspoken settled between them. Not familiarity, not yet, but possibility. The night air drifted in gently through the cracked windows, carrying a trace of Texas oak and late summer stillness. Isabel sat at a console in Nate's study, her fingers poised just above the keyboard, her breath caught somewhere between hesitation and instinct. Across from her, Nate watched in silence. He wasn't studying the screen. He was studying her, not inappropriately. There was nothing in his gaze that hinted at anything she'd learned to guard against over the years, but he was paying attention in a way few ever had. That somehow made it harder. She typed a few lines, clean, precise. Her posture was perfect, like muscle memory had pulled it from somewhere buried deep. You're still fast, Nate said quietly. I had to be, she replied, not looking up. MIT doesn't wait for you to catch up. He leaned forward slightly, watching the way her eyes moved, scanning, processing, thinking 5 steps ahead. What are you seeing? He asked. The problem's not in the code, she said, her voice calm, assured. It's in the logic path. Someone built the framework to be efficient, but too rigid. It doesn't know how to recover when the environment shifts, so it stalls. Like a traffic jam, he murmured. She nodded. Exactly. It gets stuck waiting for permission from something that isn't listening anymore. She clicked. The screen updated. The lag was gone. Nate sat back, stunned again. It wasn't just what she knew. It was how she thought. There was elegance in it. Something almost graceful. He exhaled. I spent 3 nights on that segment. You were close, she said quickly. He smiled. Don't lie to make me feel better. She finally looked up, her mouth curling into a soft, reluctant smile. Okay, you were circling it. The room went quiet for a beat. The kind of silence that doesn't press or push, but stretches gently like a held breath. I've missed this, she admitted almost to herself. Not just the coding, but being trusted with something that mattered. Nate's voice dropped. You should never have stopped. She shook her head. Life doesn't always ask what you want. Sometimes it just hands you what's left. Her words lingered in the air like an echo. Neither of them wanted to chase. He stood walking slowly to window. You ever think about going back to MIT to anything? I used to, she said, but every time I almost let myself want again. Something would remind me I don't belong in that world anymore. He turned, leaning one arm against the window frame. And who decides that, them or you? She looked down, fingers running across the edge of the keyboard. I stopped asking. Another pause. Then he stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. You didn't solve that by accident. You didn't forget how to be who you are. She blinked, suddenly unsure what to do with the weight behind his words. I don't want to be anyone's project, Mr. Harper. He smiled faintly. Good, because I don't need a project. I need a problem solver. Her brows lifted slightly. Is this a job offer? He tilted his head. Not yet, but it's the beginning of one. She nodded slowly, digesting that. Then, as if remembering her place, she stood. I should go. My shift's over. He stepped back to let her pass. But before she reached the door, he said her name, Isabel. She turned. Why cinnamon? He asked. Your notes always smell like it. A soft laugh escaped her. My aunt makes a pot of cinnamon tea every night. The scent sticks to everything. He nodded. It's memorable. So I've heard. She paused in the doorway. For just a second, their eyes locked again and something flickered. Not attraction, not yet, but connection. The spark of something still unspoken but undeniably growing. As the door closed behind her, Nate stood in the stillness of his office, staring at the screen she'd left, humming quietly. He didn't understand it yet, but he knew he was looking at someone who had just shifted the direction of his company and possibly his life. Later that week, Nate walked into the boardroom where his executive team sat in muted frustration. Jonas Riek, his CTO, was already pacing a stack of papers in hand. We're going in circles, Jonas snapped. Our backend still isn't syncing with the client-side protocols. The delays are costing us again. Danny Flores, Head of HR raised an eyebrow. Maybe we need fresh eyes. Jonah scoffed. We've had every consultant from D.C. to San Jose. Unless one of them shows up with a cape. We're out of miracles. Nate leaned against the wall, calm, almost unreadable. What if someone already did? He said quietly. Jonas stopped. Excuse me. Nate straightened. Someone fixed a critical logic flaw last week. One that had our infrastructure bleeding out. Who? Jonas asked. Nate hesitated, then said, Isabel Reyes. The maid. The room went still. Di's eyes widened slightly. Jonas's jaw tightened. You're saying the cleaning staff saw the code flaw? I'm saying she saw what none of us could. Nate said, and she didn't ask for anything in return. Jonas exhaled sharply. Nate, with all due respect, this isn't a storybook moment. We can't give rude access to someone with no degree in a mop. She hasn't asked for access. Nate said coolly. She's offered insight, and we'd be foolish not to listen. The tension in the room climbed another degree. Danny leaned forward. Is she interested in coming on board? Not yet, but she's helping me quietly. Jonas ran a hand over his tie. And what happens when word gets out that your secret weapon has 0 formal credentials and no security clearance? Then we adjust the narrative. Nate replied before the results make us irrelevant. The boardroom buzzed with low murmurs. But Nate didn't flinch, because behind the skepticism, behind the questions was fear, not a failure, of being outperformed by someone the system had forgotten. That night, Isabel returned home and found her aunt waiting on the porch, holding a cup of tea, the steam curling around her weathered hands. You're late, Rosa said. Traffic. You got that look. What look? The one you used to get before finals, when your brain ran faster than your body could keep up. Isabel dropped her bag inside. It's nothing. Is it him? Rosa asked softly. Isabel stopped. It's not like that, she said. He just sees me. Not like most people. He actually looks. Rosa nodded. That's rare but careful, Mika. Not everyone who sees you knows how to hold what they find. Isabel didn't answer. She just looked out into the night sky, thinking of the glowing screen in the quiet office and the way her name had sounded in his voice, as if it mattered. And for the first time in a very long while, she didn't feel invisible. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. Rain tapped softly against the windows of the Harper residence, casting a watercolor sheen over the skyline of downtown Austin. It was just after 6 p.m. in the house, usually pristine and controlled, buzzed with a quiet tension. In the hallway, a silver tray clinked faintly as Isabel balanced it carefully, setting out glasses and folded linen napkins, her mind a storm of its own. Tonight, the board was meeting. Nate had asked her to stay late, just in case they needed refreshments. He hadn't said why exactly, but his tone had been deliberate, intentional, and that alone was enough to knot her stomach. She could already hear them down the corridor. Muted voices, clipped sentences, people used to being heard, used to power. She didn't belong in that room. But for the first time, she wasn't sure that meant she should stay out of it. From the study, Danny Flores caught sight of her and waved her in gently. Just here, she said, pointing to the long credenza. Thank you, Isabel. Isabel gave a polite nod and kept her gaze down, moving quietly across the room. The board members barely noticed her, save for one, Jonas Riek. He turned slightly in his chair, eyes locking onto her with a curious sharpness. She felt immediately the scrutiny, not cruel, but calculating. As she set the final glass in place, she heard his voice. You're the one who's been helping Nate. It wasn't a question. She paused, slowly turned. I don't know what you mean. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Come now, let's not be coy. You've been dabbling with system diagnostics. Yes, bit of an unusual hobby for housekeeping staff. Nate, who had just entered with a folder in hand, froze at the doorway. That's enough, Jonas. I'm just curious, Jonas said, still watching Isabel. We live in a world where access is earned. This arrangement feels like a security oversight. Isabel stepped back instinctively. The heat rose in her chest, not from embarrassment, but something closer to quiet rage. She hadn't asked to be here. She hadn't inserted herself into their problems. She had solved what they couldn't. Nate crossed the room, calm but with purpose. He stood beside Isabel, eyes steady. She's contributed more in 3 weeks than some of us have in 3 years. A few heads turned, a few jaws clenched. Jonas leaned back in his chair. That may be. But when word gets out that the CEO's hiring talent off the janitorial roster will be the punchline of every investor meeting in the country. I'm not hiring her, Nate said coldly. Not yet. Isabel flinched slightly. He continued. But if and when I do, it will be because of what she's earned, not where she started. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sharp, weighted, as if the air itself held its breath. Danny cleared her throat. Let's move on to what matters. The back-end stability. The last update you pushed, it held. The log performance is up 17%. Nate didn't look away from Jonas as he spoke. That update. Isabel wrote the patch. That was the first time her name had been said aloud like that. Isabel, not the maid, not the help, her name. And it echoed. She glanced around the room, saw the flicker of discomfort in the faces of men and women who had never thought to ask who she was before. I think we're done here, Nate said quietly. The meeting dissolved with murmurs and sideways glances. One by one they filed out. Jonas was last. As he passed, he leaned in slightly toward Isabel. Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts, he whispered, not with malice, but warning. She didn't respond. She didn't need to because Nate stepped forward again, standing beside her, without a word. His presence said enough. After the last door closed, the study went still. Isabel turned slowly to face him. You didn't have to do that, she said. I did, Nate replied. They're right, she said. I don't have credentials. I don't have experience. I don't even have a degree. He stepped closer. You have talent. You have integrity. You have something this company's been missing for years. Clarity. She didn't move, but something in her eyes softened. I've spent most of my adult life trying to go unnoticed, she said, voice quieter now, because being seen meant being challenged, judged, dismissed. I see you, Nate said, and I'm not looking away. Her breath hitched just slightly. The rain picked up against the glass, tapping faster, a rhythm that filled the space between them. He reached for the console on the desk and pulled up a new set of logs. There's another problem I want you to look at. It's not urgent, but I value your perspective. She stepped forward, not as a maid, not even as a guest, but as someone who had been invited. They leaned in together, shoulder to shoulder now, as the screen lit up again. Lines of code crawled across the display, but the room was no longer about systems and syntax. It was about trust. It was about what happens when you finally stop shrinking to fit someone else's expectations. It was about being allowed to rise. As she began typing, Nate glanced sideways at her, eyes lingering for a moment too long. And when she looked up and met his gaze, the moment stretched, still not romantic. But it was no longer just professional. It was personal. And that was where the tension began. Isabel stood on the terrace outside the Harper residence, a soft breeze tugging at the hem of her blouse. The city below flickered with life. Traffic lights pulsing, restaurant patios glowing, and people moving to their Friday evening like nothing was broken. But inside her, something was shifting. It wasn't just a project or the strange tension in that boardroom. It was Nate. He had defended her again, not politely, not discreetly, fully, publicly, and it rattled her more than the confrontation itself. Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts, Jonas had said. The words had stuck with her, not because they hurt, but because she believed them. She wasn't used to being seen for the right reasons. Visibility had always come with consequences. But now behind her, the sliding glass door opened. Nate stepped out, 2 mugs in hand. I wasn't sure if you liked coffee this late, he said, but this one's cinnamon. Her eyes widened a little. You remembered. He handed her the mug, and their fingers brushed for the briefest second. I pay attention, he said. She looked at him then, not as her employer, not even as a CEO, just a man standing in the soft gold light of dusk, offering warmth he wasn't quite ready to admit he needed himself. It was a long day, she said quietly. He nodded. I didn't expect Jonas to corner you like that. I'm not surprised. Men like him don't like being outpaced by someone they don't understand. Nate tilted his head. He understands power. What he doesn't understand is humility and brilliance that doesn't need a spotlight. She took a sip. The cinnamon hit her tongue, subtle and familiar. Why do you trust me? She asked suddenly. He hesitated. Because you've never once asked for anything, and still you give everything. She looked down at her mug. That's not always a strength. It is in my world. They stood in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. You know, Nate said after a moment, the first time I saw you here, I didn't notice you. She laughed softly. That was the point. I regret that. She looked up, surprised. I regret how long it took me to see what was right in front of me. The air between them shifted closer now, warmer. But it was delicate, like walking on newly formed ice. One wrong step, and it could fracture. She moved toward the railing, gripping the edge gently. I don't want to become someone's project. You're not, he said, voice low. I'm not here to fix you. I think I just want to stand beside you while you build. She turned toward him, searching his face for insincerity. There was none, just truth. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed on the table behind him. He stepped away to check it, eyes narrowing. It's Danny, he muttered. Internal systems just flagged a new crash. Same loop, different module. He looked up at Isabel. You up for one more fix? She didn't smile. Not quite, but her eyes lit just a bit. Always. They walked inside together, side by side. In the office, he pulled up the files on the wall monitor. Code scrolled like rain. Isabel took the seat at the center console, her fingers hovering just above the keyboard again. She spoke as she worked. You see the bottleneck? Third-level authentication layer. Exactly. It's confirming something it's already confirmed over and over. He leaned closer, so it's self-sabotaging unintentionally, like it doesn't trust itself anymore. She fixed the loop, rewrote the call sequence, and paused before hitting enter. This feels familiar, she said quietly. What is this cycle? You question everything because you fail once, and then you build your whole logic around that fear. She hit enter. The system rebalanced in seconds. Nate stared at the screen, then at her. I wasn't just talking about the code, she whispered. Their eyes met again. This time it lingered. Neither was I, he replied. The moment broke when Dawn's name lit up on the corner screen. A message. One word. Stabilized. Nate exhaled. Your patch worked. She leaned back, a faint smile curling at the edges. I didn't patch it. I rewrote it. He laughed softly. Of course you did. He closed the screen gently, turning to her. Can I ask you something? She nodded. Why do you keep showing up? She blinked. You mean here? Yes. Why not leave this job? You could freelance. Apply anywhere. You're good enough. More than good enough. Her fingers toyed with the edge of the sticky note on the desk. Cinnamon still clung faintly to the air. I stayed invisible for so long, I forgot what it felt like to contribute. And now that I'm doing it again, I don't want to lose it. He stepped closer, voice softer now. Then don't. Her voice caught. I'm scared of being seen, of being chosen. It's never ended well. You don't have to earn my respect, he said gently. You already have it. And if you're waiting for me to stop believing in you, I'm afraid you'll be waiting a long time. The stillness stretched. He didn't touch her, but he didn't have to. Something passed between them, undeniable, unspoken. Then the printer in the corner to life, breaking the silence. They both laughed. I should go, she said finally, rising. He didn't stop her, but he didn't look away either. She reached the doorway and turned. Nate. Yeah, thanks for seeing me. He held her gaze. Thanks for not hiding. And as she slipped into the quiet hallway, her footsteps fading into the distance, Nate stood alone, the scent of cinnamon still in the air and the weight of something rare settling in his chest. Hope. Saturday mornings in Austin had a way of feeling slower, softer. The streets buzzed gently with early farmers market foot traffic. Guitar chords floated from open coffee shop patios, and the sun wrapped everything in a golden hush. But in the Ria's duplex on the east side, The air was laced with cinnamon and nerves. Isabel stood at the counter, hands moving automatically as she pressed dough into the pan for her aunt's empanadas. She didn't need to think about the recipe. She'd made it a H100 times, but her mind wasn't in the kitchen. It was in Nate's study on the terrace, in the silence that had almost become a confession. He saw her, and she didn't know what to do with that. "You've been quiet," Rosa said, drying a dish behind her. "That usually means something big or something dangerous." Isabel gave a short breath of laughter. "Is it possible for it to be both?" Rosa set the towel down. "What's his name?" Isabel froze for a moment, then slowly. "It's not like that." Rosa raised an eyebrow. "The way you've been floating through this house, like your shoes don't touch the ground, says otherwise." Isabel turned back to the dough. "He's different. He's your boss. He's not acting like it." "Exactly," Rosa said gently but firmly. "Men with power who blur lines aren't romantic. They're risky." Isabel exhaled. "He doesn't make me feel small. He doesn't treat me like I'm someone he's saving." Rosa stepped closer. "Does he make you feel seen? Or does he just make you feel needed?" Isabel didn't answer. She didn't know. That afternoon, Nate stood in his office, pacing with a nervous energy that felt foreign. He'd faced hostile takeovers with less uncertainty than he felt now. A new folder sat open on the desk. Inside, a code segment he knew had flaws. He'd written it that way on purpose, discreetly enough not to seem obvious, but enough for Isabel to notice if she came by. But she hadn't texted back. He rubbed the back of his neck, staring out at the skyline. The company was stable for now, but the board was still restless. Investors wanted answers, and Jonas had already scheduled a private meeting with Tesselin from the investment arm. He wasn't dumb. He knew the optics were fragile, but he also knew that the best decisions he'd made in the last month had all begun with a quiet voice that came from behind a mop bucket. He checked his phone again. Nothing. He shouldn't be this preoccupied. He wasn't the type. But something about her presence had worked its way under his skin, into his routines, his thoughts, his pauses between meetings. And it wasn't just attraction. It was trust. And that scared him more than anything. Isabel finally arrived that evening after sunset. The house was dimly lit, quiet. She moved through it like she always did. Soft footsteps unobtrusive. Her badge still clipped to her waist even though she wasn't clocked in. She found him in the study sitting on the edge of the desk, sleeves rolled to his elbows, fingers pinched at the bridge of his nose. "I didn't know if you'd come," he said without looking up. "I almost didn't," she replied honestly. He met her gaze. "But you did." She stepped into the room, hesitating at the chair. "I needed to remind myself who I was doing this for." "And who's that?" "Myself." He nodded slowly. "That's the right answer." She saw the folder open and waiting. Another test. He smiled faintly. "No, just something I'm stuck on." She took the seat, eyes scanning the code. "You wrote this wrong," she said within seconds. He laughed. "I did." She turned to him confused. "I wanted to see if you'd still catch it." She tilted her head. "Why?" "Because the more time I spend around you, the more I realize how rare it is to meet someone who does what you do without needing credit." Her throat tightened. "Maybe I stopped expecting credit, eh? Long time ago." He leaned forward, his voice gentler now. "Well, I'm not going to stop giving it." Silence fell between them, but it didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a bridge waiting to be crossed. She looked back at the screen, then back at him. "Why me?" He didn't blink. "Because you're brilliant. You barely knew me. I didn't have to." She stood then abruptly, as if staying seated made her too vulnerable. "Nate, this can't happen." He stood too slower. "I know. That's why it hasn't." Her eyes searched his face. "But you feel it, too." "Yes," he said simply. She pressed her lips together. "It's not that I don't want to let this happen. It's that I don't know how." He took a step forward, then stopped himself. "Then we don't rush. We just keep building." She let out a shaky breath. "And what if I break something? Then we fix it together." She looked down at her hands. They were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of being seen again. When she finally looked up, there was something new in her eyes. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of it. "I want this to be real," She whispered. It already is. And for the first time since her life derailed, Isabel allowed herself to feel something she had long buried beneath duty and silence. Hope. Just then, the door buzzed. A delivery. Isabel turned instinctively, stepping back into her role. I'll get it. You don't have to, Nate said. I know, she replied, already walking. And when she returned moments later, placing the envelope on the table, she didn't leave right away. Instead, she lingered, because for the first time in years, she wasn't just passing through. She was being invited to stay. The hum of fluorescent lighting filled the open-concept floor of Synologic's downtown office. Desks buzzed with low conversation, glowing screens, and the occasional frustrated sigh from engineers fighting deadlines. But in the glass-walled conference room at the end of the hall, it was quiet, except for the sound of a pen tapping against a notebook. Jonas Riek sat with his back rigid, staring through the glass at the busy floor beyond. His jaw tightened as he watched the interns gathered near the break station, laughing, animated, relaxed. It wasn't the interns he resented. It was who they were talking about. They're calling her the ghost in the machine, Danny Flores said calmly from across the table, folding her hands. Half the dev team is convinced someone's secretly cleaning up their back-end errors overnight. Jonas's nostrils flared. It's not a ghost. It's Harper's pet. Danny's tone didn't change. You mean Isabel? Jonas met her eyes. She's a housekeeper. She doesn't belong on this floor. She's solving problems none of your engineers can. Danny said simply, that earns her more right to be here than most. She's unvetted, untrained, unqualified. And yet, Danny said with a soft tilt of her head, she's been quietly stabilizing one of our riskiest modules for 3 straight weeks. No compensation, no access, no credit. Jonas stood abruptly. Exactly. No access. So, who's letting her in? Danny stood 2 slower. Let me ask you something. Jonas, what exactly bothers you more? That she's unqualified or that she's better than you? He didn't answer. He didn't have to tech. Downstairs, Isabel swiped her badge and stepped into the building. Her shoulders were tense under the crisp button-down she'd chosen that morning. Her usual uniform folded neatly in the passenger seat of her car. Today was different, and Nate had asked her to come in under the radar. Just observe, he'd said. See what you notice. Walk the floor. You don't need a title to think like a leader. It was a strange request, but she understood the intent. He trusted her intuition. Still, walking into the heart of Synologic's operation felt surreal. Rows of engineers and analysts hunched over dual monitors. Technical jargon flew through the air like shorthand poetry. The smell of burnt coffee and recycled air lingered. This used to be her world in another lifetime. Now she felt like an intruder with a past. No one could see, and a future she wasn't sure she had a right to claim. She stopped near one of the side clusters where a team of junior devs stood, puzzled over a failed deployment. Priority index is stuck again, one said, flipping through his logs. It keeps skipping cache validation because it's calling the wrong function, Isabel said before she could stop herself. It's referencing an archive token instead of the real-time packet. They turned surprised. I'm sorry. Who are you? The lead asked cautiously. Isabel hesitated. I'm just here helping. Helping who? Before she could respond, Nate's voice floated in from behind. She's with me. The team stepped back slightly as Nate joined them. Casual but confident. Isabel's been consulting with me on some of our back-end issues. Her insights have kept this company from going off a cliff more times than you know. No one challenged him. They just nodded wide-eyed and turned back to their screens. As they walked away, Nate glanced at her. You okay? She didn't answer right away. I wasn't prepared to feel like I didn't belong again. You do. I don't look like I do. Nate stomped, lowering his voice. Isabel, you don't need to wear a suit or carry a badge to prove your worth. You already did the work. You earned this. She looked at him, the weight in her chest easing just slightly. But they don't know that, she whispered. They will. By late afternoon, Isabel had returned to the executive wing. Settling into a quiet corner office Nate had offered her temporarily, a modest desk, a clean monitor, and a sticky notepad she brought from home, still faintly scented with cinnamon. She was reviewing diagnostic logs when Danny knocked softly and stepped in. Isabel. She turned, standing instinctively. Hi, Danny smiled. No need for formality. I just want to say thank you for what? For doing what others wouldn't. For fixing things without needing applause. Isabel gave a small smile. It's not about the applause. It's about the system running right. Danny stepped closer. Well, it's also about the people who keep it running, and you've earned more than silence. A pause stretched between them. You should know. Danny added more seriously. Jonas isn't thrilled. He's meeting with Tessa Lynn today. The investor board's nervous. Isabel swallowed. About me? About optics? Danny clarified. They want a clean narrative. A shiny hero with a resume. Isabel nodded slowly. And I'm a complication. No, Danny said. You're the reality. And frankly, you're the future. But that doesn't mean they won't try to rewrite the story. A moment passed. Then Isabel asked, What would you do if you were me? Di's answer came without hesitation. Keep going. Let your work speak louder than their doubt. And don't wait for permission to lead. Isabel sat back down after Danny left, staring at the screen, heart racing. She didn't want recognition. She didn't want titles. She just wanted to matter. But now she was beginning to understand that mattering came with pressure, with risk, and maybe, just maybe, with something more. Chapter. Later that evening, as the office emptied out, Nate returned to find Isabel still at her desk. The light outside had dimmed to soft violet. Most of the team had gone home, but she was still here, back straight, eyes steady, typing something quietly into the terminal. You stayed late, he said. I had thoughts. He smiled. Do they involve saving my company again? She looked up at him, eyes tired but glowing. Just maybe. He walked to the desk, placed a takeout bag beside her. Tacos from Barrera Cruz, he said. Thought you could use dinner. She opened the bag, inhaled. You remember my favorite. I pay attention, he said softly. She held his gaze, and this time neither of them looked away. The east side of Austin wore its resilience like a second skin. Old murals faded under years of sun. Corner shops still buzzed with neighborhood gossip, and sidewalks cracked from tree roots curled like stories buried beneath cement. This was Isabel's world long before Nate Harper had walked into it. Before code, before recognition, before coffee in glass-walled offices. Now, for the first time, he was stepping into hers. Nate parked his matte gray sedan a block from the duplex and stepped out slowly, adjusting the sleeves of his shirt, like it would somehow make him blend in better. He hadn't told her he was coming. He wasn't even sure why he'd driven there, only that he couldn't shake the image of her working in that corner office last night, lit only by the screen and the softness in her expression when he handed her those tacos. There was something about her focus, her hunger, and the way she seemed to hide in plain sight, as if she convinced herself she didn't deserve to take up space. He wasn't sure what he expected to find on her street. Maybe a version of her past that explained all the grace she carried now. What he found was a porch with wind chimes that sang gently in the breeze, and a woman older composed sitting on a wicker chair with a worn paperback in her lap and sharp eyes above her glasses. You must be Mr. Harper, Rosa said before he could speak. Nate straightened a bit, caught off guard. That obvious? She smiled faintly. You got I don't belong here written all over your shoes. Come on up. He climbed the steps slowly. Rosa motioned to the empty chair beside her, but didn't wait for him to sit. She's not home yet. Still at your office, probably making magic no one's paying her for. She's not doing it for pay, Nate said quietly. I know, Rosa replied. That's the part that worries me. He glanced over at her. Rosa sighed, folding the edge of her page. She's always been that way. Quiet, exact, soft-spoken, but sharper than anyone in the room. My brother used to say she could fix a puzzle just by glancing at it. But when her world collapsed, she folded herself up, made herself smaller to survive. Nate looked down at his hands. I don't want her to shrink anymore, he said. Rosa studied him. Do you care about her because she's brilliant or because she's useful? He looked up. The question hit harder than he expected. I care about her because she's brave, he said. And she doesn't even know it. Rosa nodded slowly. Good answer. But caring isn't always enough. Just make sure you're not another man who sees her light and thinks it's yours to hold. The porch creaked behind them as footsteps approached. Thought I heard voices. Isabel froze on the steps, her eyes widening as she spotted Nate. What are you doing here? I was in the area, he said, which even he knew sounded ridiculous. Rosa gave a small laugh and stood. I'll leave you too. Don't let the tea burn. She disappeared into the house, and silence hung between them as Isabel stepped up the porch. You shouldn't have come here, she said softly. I know. I didn't invite you. I know that too. She looked at him for a long moment. Then why are you here? Because I couldn't stop thinking about what you said last night about being scared to be seen. Her expression flickered, and then I realized I spent most of my life being seen, but never known. I thought maybe we had that in common. She sat down slowly, folding her hands in her lap. This isn't your world. I don't want it to be. I just wanted to see yours. The tension began to loosen, the air between them softening like dusk, settling over city after the heat. My dad planted that tree when we moved in, Isabel said suddenly, nodding to the sturdy pecan tree at the edge of the yard. He said we'd never starve with food in the backyard. Nate followed her gaze. Is he still here, but not like he used to be? Some days he forgets my name. Some days he remembers MIT. Never both. Nate nodded gently. That's why you stayed. She smiled faintly. I stayed because no one else could, and because I couldn't bear to leave when he didn't understand why I'd gone. He looked at her then, not as a woman who fixes code or stunned his boardroom, but as someone who had held the weight of sacrifice with a kind of grace he'd never known. You gave up everything for him, he said. No, she replied. I gave up everything for love. That's not the same thing. The quiet swelled again. Then more gently she asked, Do you regret coming here? No, even though I didn't ask you to. I didn't come for permission, Isabel. I came because I needed to understand the parts of you I haven't earned yet. She met his eyes, her own suddenly glassy. That's a dangerous thing to say. Then let it be dangerous. The front door creaked open behind them. Rosa poked her head out. Tea's ready. I made extra. Isabel didn't move. Nate smiled softly. I should go. You don't have to. He looked at her, really looked, and saw the flicker of conflict behind her composure. Wanting to protect her world, wanting to share it. Invite me next time, he said quietly. Not as your boss, just as someone who wants to know where you come from. She nodded slowly. Maybe I will. He stood, stepped off the porch, and walked back toward the street, the wind chimes dancing behind him like a song only the two of them understood. And for the first time, she watched him go, not with doubt, but with fragile, forming trust. The gala was loud in all the wrong ways, polished laughter, champagne flutes clinking like rehearsed applause, and a jazz trio that tried too hard to matter. The Synologic annual fundraiser had always been more about appearances than impact. Tonight, it felt especially performative. Isabel stood near the far end of the room, back straight, posture perfect. Her dress was borrowed. Rosa's old navy blue gown altered just enough to fit, and her heels were already beginning to ache. But none of that mattered. She wasn't here to dazzle. She was here because Nate had asked her to come. Not as staff, not as help, as his guest. You clean up well, Danny whispered beside her, balancing a glass of wine and a sly smile. Isabel let out a soft breath. I feel like a decoy at a royal wedding. You don't look like one. That's not the same thing. Danny gave her a longer look. Gentler now. It's okay to feel uncomfortable, but you belong in this room. You earned this space. Isabel's eyes traveled across the crowd. Board members, venture partners, investors in tailored suits, and at the center, Nate Harper, laughing softly with cluster executives, shoulders relaxed, eyes scanning the room every few seconds like he was looking for someone. She didn't think he'd find her in this crowd. She wasn't meant to be found here. And then his eyes did find her. It was immediate, an unspoken recognition, like a pause in a song only they could hear. He excused himself from the group and made his way through the ballroom with deliberate steps. Isabel, he said when he reached her, voice quieter than everything around them. You found me. she said, the corners of her mouth pulling into something between a smile and disbelief. You weren't hiding. She gave him a look. You say that like I know how to do anything else. He stepped closer. You look don't, she interrupted softly. Don't say something you'll want to take back. I wasn't going to say beautiful, he said. She raised an eyebrow. I was going to say steady. That caught her off guard. I know these rooms, he continued. They're full of noise, pretending to be power. But you, he leaned in slightly, voice low. You're quiet, and everyone still feels you. Before she could respond, a voice called out from behind. Ah, Isabel Jonas. He stepped into their circle like he owned it, drink in hand, grin too wide to be sincere. I almost didn't recognize you, he said, tone sharp beneath the charm. You've certainly come up in the world. Isabel held her ground. Just visiting. Jonas sipped his drink. Well, enjoy it. These things don't last. Nate's expression darkened. But Isabel touched his arm just once, enough to stop whatever he might have said. She looked Jonas in the eye. I'm not here to last. I'm here to change things. Jonas chuckled and walked away, but the statement hung in the air, firm and final. Nate turned to her, quieter now. You didn't need me to defend you. I never did. Then why let me try? She looked up at him, something gentle in her eyes, because sometimes it's nice to be reminded that someone will. They moved to a quieter corner near the balcony doors. Outside, the city glimmered under layers of soft fog and distant lights. He opened the door. Want some air? She nodded and they stepped outside. The noise faded behind them. Only the wind spoke now, brushing through her curls and across his collar. I didn't think I'd stay this long, she admitted, resting her hands on the balcony rail. At the gala at Center Logic in your orbit, he stood beside her, not touching, but close enough for her to feel it. You thought I'd push you out. I thought I'd leave before I got used to being here. He glanced at her. Are you used to it? No, she said honestly. But I want to be. A long pause. Then he asked, What do you want, Isabel? She turned toward him, startled. What do you mean? I mean, when you let the dust settle and stop surviving, what's left? What's the thing that's just for you? Her mouth opened, then closed. No one had asked her that in years. I want to build something of my own, she said quietly. Not just code, something lasting, something that matters. You already are. No, she shook her head gently. Right now, I'm a ghost in your system. I want to be more than a fix. He nodded slowly. Then let's start there. She looked at him uncertain. What does that mean? It means I'm opening a proposal next month. Synologic Labs, independent projects. Your name can be on the door. She froze. Nate, it's not charity. I know. It's belief. Her breath hitched. I can't promise I won't fail. I'm counting on it, he said. Failing means you're building something worth the risk. They stood in silence again, the kind that wrapped around them instead of pushing them apart. I don't know if I can lead, she said finally. You don't have to know yet. You just have to want to try. She looked out at the city, blinking back the swell in her chest. I do. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't have to because that night under the hum of distant jazz and the pressure of 100 watching eyes, Isabel Reyes took up space, and this time she didn't shrink. Monday morning at Synologic was quiet in a way that felt almost respectful. The air held a new kind of stillness, like something had shifted. Not loud, not flashy, but undeniable. Engineers spoke in lower tones, glancing at each other with a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Word had gotten out. Nate Harper was preparing to launch Synologic Labs, and he was doing it with Isabel Reyes. At her usual corner desk, now affectionately dubbed Command Central by a few interns, Isabel sat staring at the new schematic Nate had left her that morning. A clean slate, the foundational framework for the lab he wanted her to lead. Her name was watermarked in the corner. Project Director Isabel Reyes. She hadn't even opened the file yet. The cursor blinked at her, like it was waiting for permission. You okay? Isabel looked up to see Danny leaning in the doorway, arms folded. Behind her, sunlight poured in through the glass, catching the glint of her hoop earrings. I should be, Isabel replied. I want to be. Danny stepped in, pulling the door shut gently behind her. Then why do you look like you're about to run? Isabel stared at the screen. Because it's easier to hide behind a keyboard than lead from the front. You've already been leading. They're just putting your name on it now. Isabel looked up. Do you ever feel like if people really knew how much you doubted yourself, they'd stop believing in you? Danny tilted her head. No, I think if they knew, they'd believe in you more. That made Isabel pause. She glanced back at the schematic, then closed the file gently. I don't know how to build a lab, she admitted. I've never run a team. I don't have a degree hanging on a wall. My resume is a blank page, Danny. Danny took a seat across from her. You don't need a resume to prove your worth. You've already done the work. You've saved this company from a $200 million disaster. You've earned Nate's trust. You've earned mine. A silence stretched between them, warm, but waited. Then Danny added, but if it helps, you're allowed to be scared. Isabel smiled faintly. I'm terrified. Danny grinned. Good. That means you're about to do something important. Nate was on the rooftop terrace when Isabel finally found him, pacing, phone in hand, sleeves rolled, voice low. I don't care what the board thinks, Michael, he said firmly. We're not shelving the lab. If they want a safe bet, they can go invest in office chairs. He paused, listening, then glanced up as Isabel stepped into view. Yeah, he said. I'll call you back. He hung up and slid the phone into his pocket, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly. You heard? I read the schematic, she said, and it's ambitious. He smirked. Now that's my brand. She joined him at the edge of the terrace, eyes scanning the city below. I don't want to be a symbol. Nate, you're not. I don't want to be your redemption arc. You're not that either. She turned to face him. Then what am I? You're the reason I believe this company still has a future. The words hit harder than she expected. You always know the right thing to say, she said, voice soft. I don't, he replied. But when it comes to you, I know what I feel. Their eyes held for a long moment, and then the elevator doors slid open behind them. Jonas stepped out, polished, calm, his expression unreadable. Apologies for the interruption, he said. Board requested an update on the lab. They want a formal proposal by Friday. Nate's jaw tensed. We'll have it. Jonas glanced at Isabel. And the proposal will list her as director. Yes. Well, Jonas said, nodding. That'll make the investors nervous. Nate stepped forward. Then let them be nervous. Jonas turned to Isabel. You sure you want this, mysteries? Once your name's on it, you're accountable for everything that goes wrong. Isabel didn't flinch. Then I'll also be accountable for everything that goes right. Jonas gave a short nod. Good luck. He turned and walked back toward the elevator, leaving a silence that hung heavy behind him. Isabel exhaled slowly. I hate that he's right, she said. He's not, Nate replied. He's scared. She looked up at him. Of me, of change. They stood together for a long moment, the city breeze threading between them. Friday, she murmured. Do you need more time? She shook her head. No, I need support. You'll have it. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time she believed it, not just in his words, but in herself. That evening, back at home, Isabel sat at the kitchen table with her father. He was humming something tuneless, eyes vacant but calm. She placed a plate in front of him, and he smiled faintly. You always know how to make it taste like home, he said. She blinked, her hand stilling. Dad. He looked at her clearly just for a moment. MIT girl, he whispered. You never stopped dreaming, did you? Her throat caught. No, she said softly. Not really. He smiled again, and the moment passed, his gaze drifting elsewhere, his hands returning to routine. But something had shifted, something small, something sacred. She stepped into the living room, pulled out her laptop, and opened the file again. Project Director Isabel Reyes. She took a deep breath and began to write. The boardroom was colder than usual, not in temperature, but in mood. 12 chairs, high-backed and perfectly spaced, surrounded the long glass table. At the head, Nate sat still, jaw tight, gaze forward. Beside him, Isabel, in a fitted gray blazer borrowed from Danny, clutched a slim folder that held a proposal she'd stayed up 3 nights preparing. Her pulse thundered in her ears. This was it, the moment the ghost stepped into the light. On the far end of the table, Jonas Rick cleared his throat, slow and deliberate, like punctuation before a challenge. "We reviewed the file," he said, flipping through his own copy like it personally offended him. "It's ambitious but unconventional." A few murmurs of agreement. Two board members adjusted their glasses without looking at her. Isabel Reyes. Another voice chimed in. Tessa Lynn, calm and clinical. No formal engineering title. No executive experience. "Can you walk us through why you believe you're qualified to lead a seven-figure innovation lab?" Isabel looked up. Her throat tightened, but her voice held. "I don't have a title because I wasn't given one, but I've been building this lab without a title for the past 4 weeks. Quietly, efficiently, with results." Tessa arched an eyebrow. "And the risks?" "I've lived them." Isabel said, "Every piece of broken code I've fixed was a system someone else gave up on. Every decision I've made here was because I had nothing to protect me but the truth." Another pause. Jonas leaned forward, fingers interlocked. "Let's be honest. This isn't about your ability to code. It's about the optics of letting a former maid lead a project that could define the future of this company." Nate flinched slightly. Isabel didn't move. She let the silence stretch, then clear and unwavering. "If you're worried about optics, maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe it's that it took someone like me to fix what your best teams couldn't." A breath hitched across the room. One of the younger board members sat back, visibly impressed. Jonas's lips pressed into a line. "So, this is your leadership style. Defiance?" "No," she said softly. "It's clarity. And I'm not here to make anyone comfortable. I'm here to make things better." Nate turned to her, pride rising behind his steady gaze. Then he looked back at the table. "If you're looking for safe, say no. If you're looking for progress, real ground shaking, people-first innovation, then you know what to do." Tessa was the first to speak. "I vote yes." Two more followed quickly. Then another. Jonas stayed silent until the very end. "I abstain," he said coolly, closing his folder. But it didn't matter. The vote passed, 7-1. The lab was hers. As the meeting dispersed, Nate stayed back. So did Isabel. Neither spoke right away. When they were alone, she finally exhaled. "I thought I was going to throw up." "You didn't." "I wanted to walk out." "You didn't." She looked at him and for the first time allowed herself a smile. Not guarded, not small, real. "You believed in me before I did," she said. He stepped closer. "No, you believed in you. I just saw it first." There was something in the air between them now. No longer uncertainty, but gravity. He reached for her hand, tentative. She didn't pull away. But before the moment could stretch into something more, Danny entered breathless. "We've got a problem," she said quickly. Isabel straightened. "What is it?" Danny held up her phone. "There's a leak. Someone fed early info about the lab to the press, and they're spinning it." "Spinning it how?" Nate asked. "They're framing it as a PR stunt. Calling Isabel your in-house Cinderella story. Saying the company's trying to extract from last quarter's losses by promoting a maid with no credentials." Isabel's face drained. Nate's jaw tightened. "Jonas." Danny didn't confirm, but her silence said enough. Isabel took a step back. This is what I was afraid of, that they'd use my past to discredit the work." Nate stepped forward. "Then we don't let them. We respond together." "How?" "You write your story before they finish writing it for you." She hesitated. "I don't want pity." "You're not getting pity," Danny said. "You're getting the truth from your mouth on your terms." Isabel stood there for a long second, then looked at them both. "Then I'll say exactly what I mean." She turned toward the glass wall where the city waited beyond. "I didn't clean this company's floors because I was weak. I did it because I had a family to protect. I stayed because I saw something broken and believed I could fix it. That doesn't make me a gimmick. That makes me a leader." Silence followed, and then Danny whispered, "Say it just like that." Isabel's voice steadied. "I will." And for the first time, she wasn't just defending her right to be here. She was ready to claim it. The studio lights were too bright. Isabel blinked against the glare. her heart thudding beneath the charcoal gray blazer. She'd almost returned twice that morning. The set was sleek, modern paneling, soft neutral tones. A single high-definition camera aimed directly at her. A producer adjusted her mic, while another ran through last-minute notes with the host. "You're the headline today," the host said cheerfully. "We've had 3 million views on the teaser alone. People love a good underdog story." Isabel flinched slightly. Underdog. The word sat heavy on her tongue, like something someone else decided she was. She nodded quietly, adjusted her seat, and glanced to the glass where Nate stood in the control booth. Their eyes met. He gave her a small nod. No pressure, just presence. She turned back toward the camera. A red light blinked on, and the world tuned in. "Today we're joined by Isabel Reyes," the host began, smiling wide. "A name that's taken tech by storm. From housekeeper to head of Synologic Labs. Isabel, welcome." "Thank you," Isabel said. Her voice was steady. Her hands weren't. "Let's talk about the story everyone's been sharing. You were working as a maid, and now you're leading a multi-million-dollar innovation lab. How does that happen?" She took a slow breath. "I saw something broken, and I fixed it." The host paused, intrigued. "Just like that?" "No," Isabel said. "Not just like that. I cleaned floors for 5 years. I worked late. I studied on my breaks. I taught myself what no one would teach me. And when I saw code failing and systems collapsing, I stepped in, not because anyone asked me to, but because I couldn't look away." There was a stillness in the room. The host leaned forward. "Some critics are saying this is just a feel-good marketing play that you were promoted because it makes the company look progressive. What do you say to that?" "I say I didn't ask for a headline," Isabel replied. "I asked for access. I didn't campaign for a promotion. I earned trust bit by bit, task by task, line of code by line of code." The host blinked. Isabel didn't stop. "I'm not your Cinderella. I didn't lose a shoe at a ball. I lost time. I lost opportunities. I lost nights and dreams and quiet tears over sinks no one else would scrub. And I kept going." The words didn't feel rehearsed. They felt rooted, grounded in something real. She could see Nate in the booth, still listening, watching her become someone neither of them had fully met yet. The host nodded slower now. "What do you hope people take away from your story?" Isabel's voice softened. "That brilliance doesn't always come wrapped in degrees or titles. Sometimes it comes in silence and service, in rooms where no one's watching. And I hope someone watching this, someone working 2 jobs or helping their family survive, knows they're not invisible." A pause stretched. Then the host smiled gently. "We'll be right back after the break." The red light blinked off. The air in the studio shifted. The producer whispered, "You crushed it." But Isabel didn't move. Not right away. She looked down at her hands. They were steady now. Later that evening, Synologic's common area was unusually quiet. The video had gone live only an hour ago, but the feedback was already rolling in. Comments flooding social, email inboxes buzzing. Even old alumni from her coding boot camp sending messages. She stepped outside for air. Nate followed a minute later, holding 2 mugs of hot tea. "Cinnamon," he said, offering one. She took it, wrapping her hands around the warmth. "You remembered." "I always do." They stood side by side, overlooking the city skyline. The air was crisp. Her voice finally broke the silence. "I thought I'd feel triumphant." "You don't?" She shook her head. "I feel exposed, like the whole world just saw inside me." "That's not a bad thing," he said softly. "You let them see what real strength looks like." Her eyes turned toward him. "You always talk like you've known me longer than I've known myself." "Maybe I have." They both laughed quietly, then fell back into silence. "You changed my life," she whispered. Nate's gaze didn't waver. "You changed mine first." He stepped closer. Not rushed, not scripted, just honest. "I didn't fall for you because you saved the company," he said. "I fell because you kept showing up when no one was looking. Because you refused to quit. Because you kept fixing broken things, even when one of them was me." Her breath caught. "I don't want to be your redemption story," she said softly. "You're not," he replied. "You're the beginning of mine." The lights of the city shimmered behind them, and for the first time, Isabel leaned into it. Not just a moment, but the possibility, the risk, the real. She didn't need to be perfect. She just needed to be her. And tonight, she was everything. Rain whispered against the glass like a lullaby no one had invited. Isabel stood at the edge of the conference room, her arms folded, eyes tracing the water's slow descent down the pane. The lab was quiet tonight, too quiet. Danny had taken the team out for a celebratory dinner, and for once Isabel had chosen solitude. Behind her, a whiteboard still bore the marks of a 2-hour strategy session. Lines of code, projections, blueprints of what the next 6 months would look like. The future was no longer some abstract concept. It had shape now, texture, her name carved into its foundation, but it also came with shadows. The article had been published that morning, not the one from the interview, a follow-up. An anonymous insider had leaked additional information, details about her past employment, her financial hardship, even speculation about the real reason Nate had promoted her. Headlines danced the edge of accusation without ever naming it directly. She's too close to the CEO. She's a media darling with no real oversight. She's a story, not a solution. Isabel had read the first line and stopped. Now she stood in the stillness, letting the hum of the overhead lights fill the silence where her confidence used to sit. She heard the door open behind her, soft footsteps crossing the room. Nate didn't speak right away. "I shouldn't have left you alone tonight," he said. "I asked you to. I know, but I came anyway." She didn't turn. "Then you're not very good at listening." He stepped beside her, gazed out the window. The rain painted long streaks against the city lights. "You saw it," she said. "Yeah, and they're wrong." Her voice was quieter now. "That doesn't mean it won't stick." He looked at her then. "Do you think what we built together is only standing because of me? I think it's easier for people to believe that than to imagine a woman like me earning this without help. A woman like you." She turned to face him. "Brown, working ass, unaccredited, female. Do you want the full list?" He didn't flinch. "You earned this because of your mind," he said. "Because you solved problems no one else could. Because you gave more than anyone asked you to. But they'll still reduce it to proximity, to affection." He stepped closer. "Then let me make this clear. I didn't fall in love with you because you were near me. I fell because every time I watched you move through this place, I saw someone who had already survived more than most of us could handle. And you did it with grace." She blinked, stunned. "You've never said that before." "I wasn't ready to say it out loud," he admitted, "but I think I've been feeling it since the first time you fixed that bug, like it was nothing." A beat passed between them, heavy but warm. She looked away. "I don't want this to define us." "It won't, but it could ruin everything we've worked for." "Then we work harder." Silence again, the kind that held weight, but not fear. Finally, she asked, "Do you think it's possible to lead and still be loved?" He reached for her hand, not to pull, just to offer. "I think when you lead with truth, love finds a way to stay." She let her fingers close around his. They stood there like that. Two people against a world too quick to judge, too slow to understand. A storm outside, but something steady inside. After a long pause, she pulled away gently and walked to the table, picking up the marker. Without a word, she crossed out the old timeline and rewrote the launch date, moved it 2 weeks earlier. Nate raised an eyebrow. "That's aggressive." She looked over her shoulder. "I want results to speak louder than whispers." He nodded, his voice low. "Then let's make them listen." She smiled. "Not big, not for show, but real. Because tonight, under pressure, under judgment, and under rain, Isabel Reyes didn't fold. She recalibrated. The countdown clock hit 0. And then it began. The launch of Synologic Labs, streamed live to over 1 million viewers. Not just tech insiders, not just press, but everyday people. The kind Isabel had once stood beside in laundry lines and late-night buses. People who watched from nursing stations, community colleges, call centers, and crowded apartments. People who weren't used to seeing someone like them at the center of a stage like this. The lights dimmed in the Synologic auditorium. A soft instrumental played, Strings and piano, understated and warm. Nate stepped to the podium first, crisp and calm. His voice clear over the mic. Tonight we begin a new chapter, not just for innovation, but for access, for possibility, for building what hasn't been built by the people who haven't been seen. He paused. And I'd like to introduce the person who made that possible. Not because I gave her permission, but because she never needed it in the first place. Isabel Reyes. The applause rose slowly, tentative at first, then real. She stepped on the stage in black slacks, a midnight blue blouse, and sneakers that told everyone exactly who she still was. Her curls were pulled back. No jewelry, no statement makeup, just presence. She took the mic. I wasn't supposed to be here. The room fell silent. I wasn't trained in the ways that get you invitations to podiums. I didn't attend the schools that fast-track promotions. I was a maid. I scrubbed whiteboards before I ever got to write on one. I cleaned bathrooms after people who would never learn my name. And I watched brilliant ideas die because the people who had them didn't look like they belonged. Her hands gripped the edges of the podium, not to steady herself, but to ground the truth. And then one day I fixed something. Quietly in error, no one else saw. And suddenly I was visible. A ripple moved through the crowd. Not the polished kind of applause, the breathing kind, the listening kind. So this lab, this new chapter isn't about me being exceptional. It's about the system finally being open enough to realize that brilliance doesn't always wear a badge. It wears silence, hustle, hope, and grit. Her voice softened. If you're out there and no one sees you yet, keep showing up. Keep building. You don't need their spotlight to start your fire. She stepped back. No grand bow. No dramatic pause, just honesty and space. The room erupted. Backstage, Nate found in the shadows, hands still trembling from adrenaline. You wrecked them, he whispered, pride gleaming in his voice. I thought I'd pass out. You glowed, she let out a shaky laugh. They'll come for me again. They'll fail again. She looked up at him, unsure. What if this changes things between us? He blinked. Hasn't already? No. I mean, what if people think that us being together is the reason any of this happened? He held her gaze. Then let them think whatever they want, he said. As long as you know the truth. I do. He stepped closer, brushing a stray curl behind her ear. Then nothing else matters. A knock at the dressing room door interrupted them. Danny peeked in, her grin wild. You're trending #1, she said breathlessly. Worldwide. Isabel laughed. A real laugh. The kind that shook her ribs and cracked something open inside her that had been sealed for too long. You coming to the after party? Danny added. In a minute, she said. Danny nodded and disappeared again. Nate reached for her hand, warm and sure. Come on, he said. Let's go celebrate. But she hesitated. Nate, before we walk out there, I need to know something. Anything. Are you proud of me because I proved something or because I stayed who I was through it? His voice dropped to a whisper. I'm proud of you because you never traded your soul for success. You carried it all the way through. Tears welled at the corners of her eyes. But she didn't wipe them. He held her there just long enough to remind her this was hers. All of it. The fight, the fall, the rise, and now the light. The city looked different from the rooftop tonight. Quieter, wiser. The sun was beginning to set, painting the glass buildings in soft golds and burnt ambers. Isabel leaned on the railing of Synologic's executive terrace, her eyes tracing the skyline she'd once watched from a crowded bus window. This was the same city, but it wasn't the same life. Behind her, laughter floated up from the lower courtyard. Voices from her team, people who once overlooked her now lining up to learn from her. Engineers, analysts, young interns, even a few who reminded her of herself just a year ago, tired, invisible, but still carrying that flicker of belief. She closed her eye for a moment and breathed in the evening air. You always did like high places, Nate said softly behind her. She turned slightly. He was holding 2 cups of coffee. Hers, cinnamon, of course, steamed gently in the breeze. You're late, she teased. I was letting the moment find you. She smiled and took the cup. It did. They stood side by side, watching the lights start to blink across the skyline. "Do you remember?" she asked. "The first time you saw me here." He glanced sideways. "On the maintenance floor. I thought you were just passing through. And I was," she said, "until I realized no one else was stopping to fix what was broken. You were never passing through, Isabel. You were just waiting to be seen." Her eyes shimmered. "It's strange. I spent so long trying to stay small, and now the whole world has an opinion about me." Nate turned toward her fully. "You didn't get here because of what people said about you. You got here because of what you said to yourself when no one else was listening." She swallowed hard. For a moment, the only sound between them was a hush of traffic far below and the hum of possibility all around. Then she whispered, "I'm not sure what comes next." "Good," he said. "That means you're still growing." She looked at him. "You've always believed in me more than I thought I deserved." He stepped closer. "And you've reminded me who I want to be." Her breath caught. There was no audience now, no media, no judgment. Just two people standing in the quiet aftermath of something beautiful they'd built together. Nate reached into his jacket. Suddenly awkward. She watched as he pulled out something small, smooth silver, and trembling slightly in his hand. "Don't do that," she said, her voice suddenly shaking. "Do what?" She laughed with emotion. "Make this harder believe." He knelt down slowly, not dramatic, just honest. The rooftop lights blinked on behind him, catching the edges of the ring like it was part of the skyline itself. "I don't want to be another chapter in your story, Isabel. I want to be the home you come back to after you change the world." She stared at him, blinking back tears. "You really think I can do that?" "You already are." Silence stretched between them like a heartbeat. Then, "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." He stood, slipping the ring onto her finger. She looked down at it, then up at him, not because of the jewelry, but because of what it meant. Not rescue, recognition, not a fairy tale. A partnership. Chapter. A month later, the lab launched its first public project, an AI-powered accessibility platform designed to help underserved communities bridge the digital gap. They named it Second Voice. The name came from something Isabel once said in passing during a late-night meeting. Sometimes people don't need a new start. They just need someone to say what they couldn't. The launch was quiet by design. No fanfare, just service. And it worked. Requests poured in from community centers, shelters, schools, and elderly homes. The ripple effect began exactly the way Isabel had imagined, not with a bang, but with a hand extended quietly, deliberately, with care. Jonas Riek submitted his official resignation 2 days after the launch. He cited creative misalignment. Danny was promoted to VP of Inclusion. Marcus Chu, now a rising developer on Isabel's team, started mentoring interns from the same low-income school district he came from. Isabel had watched him help a 17-year-old girl debug her first code line and whispered to herself, "This is what legacy looks like." She didn't need statues. She needed that. One evening, weeks after the dust had settled, Isabel visited her father's room. He was humming softly, turning pages in a photo album she didn't remember putting there. She sat beside him. He pointed to an old picture, a girl, age 11, standing next to a chalkboard with a hand-drawn algorithm, and the words Rhea's system scribbled in red crayon. "You used to say you were going to build something nobody had ever seen?" He said, her eyes filled. "You remembered that?" She asked. He nodded, slow and tired, but present. "I never forgot. I was just waiting to see it." She leaned into him and closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of soap and old paper. "I think I finally did it, Dad." "You did," he whispered, "and you brought us all with you." Weeks turned into months. The noise died down. The cameras disappeared. But the work, steady, purposeful, world-bending, remained. And Isabel, she kept showing up, not because she had something to prove, but because she had something to build. And this time, she wasn't building alone. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy or more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So, do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next.